Our next speaker for EXL 2022 is Phillip Dieppa. Phillip A. Dieppa is currently serving in the US Army as a Chief Warrant Officer 3 stationed in Joint Base Lewis McCord, Washington, Duty 1 Corps. Phillip has served in the IT industry within the US Army for 18 consecutive years and has served in Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Washington, Italy, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He has worked as a Helpdesk Supervisor, Server Administrator, Software Developer, Cloud Engineer, and Microsoft Certified Trainer. He holds a bachelor's degree in Computer and Information Science from UMGC and was recently accepted into Georgia Tech's Computer Science graduate program. He holds an active Microsoft Certified Trainer credential and has taught over 300 US Army Warrant Officers in the past 3 years. As a reminder to all of our attendees, this conference is being recorded. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please use the Q&A tool if you have a question for the speaker. The stage is all yours, Phillip. You can now share your content and unmute yourself.
Awesome, thank you. Can you hear me and see me just fine?
Yes, we can. You look great.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to take a moment and extend a warm thanks to Mr. Ghazawi for allowing me to speak with you all today. I think this is a really unique opportunity for us to share from the U.S. Army our perspective on what we're doing on training our soldiers and at least modernizing our workforce, our IT workforce in particular, because that's sort of where my area of expertise is at. So thank you, Mr. Ghazawi. Thank you to Extreme Labs for allowing us to speak with you all today. All right, so I want to start out with just a simple introduction of myself, though I think the intro that I was given, that was probably more than enough. But I really what I wanted to do is just say, from a soldier's perspective, who I am. I'm a normal person, just like you all. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an IT professional. I've been doing IT for a while. I have a passion for engineering software, and I also have a passion for teaching people. And so that's sort of where the Microsoft Certified Trainer piece comes in. More importantly, I'm a soldier, and really what that means is soldiers are in our culture. The soldier has a very high set of standards. As you'll see here in a minute, what these credentials look like for soldiers. But I'm just a normal everyday person, except I'm, perhaps wearing a different uniform and outfit. I don't have to think about what I wear in the morning because I usually wear this, so it's a little convenient. But on a day-to-day basis, we encounter the same issues as many of you all are facing out there, whether it's teaching people or whether it's performing IT functions within your organization. So who we are as soldiers, we have a lot of diverse skill sets, which make us really unique in the military. We come from a lot of different backgrounds, meaning we come from every area. We have people coming from the Pacific Northwest. We have people coming from the East Coast. We have immigrants coming in that are joining the military that can't even really speak English. So they learn English while they're going through training within the Army, which makes for a very unique situation when they show up to the unit and we have to start teaching them. We have very strict qualifications, and there's basically a minimum set of credentials that are needed in order to join the military. But if you were to become a warrant officer or an officer, there are higher standards and higher qualifications that are needed in order to hold these positions of higher responsibility. So how does the workforce, how is our workforce really composed? And I want to talk specifically about the rank structure, because I think the rank structure is probably one of the most commonly viewed items when we're looking at the military. I'm sure many of y'all have heard the term general or captain, like Captain America. But what does that really mean in terms of what we do and the positions and roles that we are assuming when we hold a particular rank? So just for your reference, I sit right here. though many of the people that I work with and that I've also trained are in this category right here, where you see the W1, and then you see the 2, and then the 3, and then the 4. So that's my primary target audience when I am teaching. Though on a day-to-day interaction, when I'm performing IT functions, I'm typically working with these folks right here. And so you'll see here this sort of interaction block will start sliding off to the right to show how each rank interacts with each other rank, more or less, really. But here's how it basically works. So on the very top, these are our specialists. And really, we do have a specialist rank, but in reality, like our specialists, some of them may have degrees, some of them may not. But over time, they will gain experience and they'll gain positions of higher responsibility. And so typically this is going to be our touch labor sort of workforce. These are going to be the folks that are going out, making cables, plugging things in, checking network connectivity. Eventually, if they're interested, they can continue the path and potentially become a command sergeant major, or they can become a warrant officer. And so these warrant officers are really, they're technicians. They're kind of a combination of technicians and engineers, depending on the role that they're performing in the organization. They could be performing at a much higher level, where they could be somewhat of an architect, where they're developing the infrastructure designed for the US Army as a whole. And really, it is all depending on your level. But then we also have these engineers and managers, and I would say that these are equivalent to your not quite like a principal if we were talking about, a civilian organization, but these would be your senior engineering managers is really what I would refer to them as. It's when we get to the general officers when we start getting to that principal level or that higher level organizational structure where we don't tend to talk in very specific terms at this point, but we talk in more generalities. So what you can see here is that we have a little bit of something for everybody. If you just want to come to work and do a 9-to-5 job, then hey, being a specialist is probably the right role. If you want to be actively involved in developing the Army's infrastructure, then being a warrant officer is probably the right path. If you want to manage a team of technicians, then becoming an officer is probably the right path. Or if you want to be in charge of strategic groups of technicians, then maybe being a general officer is the right answer here. So with that said, each rank also comes with a different occupation specialty. And these occupation specialties are basically a small little formula between the branch and the career management field, which is the CMF that you see right here, this 25 series. So I tend to operate out of the Signal Corps branch. Well, at least that is my branch. And within the Signal Corps, we have many different career management fields. And as you can see off to the right, we have many different enlisted ranks, or MOSs, or occupational specialties. We have only a few warrant officer specialties, and then we have a single officer specialty. In reality, we do have these engineers, and we have a network engineer, and then we have a systems engineer. And so the systems engineers are represented as these functional area, or FA, occupational specialties. So you can see that we have this branch and then the career management field, and then that brings us into whatever type of role that particular MOS or occupational specialty within the signal regiment will require us to perform. Now, each branch has a center of excellence, and that center of excellence is responsible for many things within your branch. So first off, the U.S. Army Signal School falls under the Cyber Center of Excellence, and they're located out of Fort Gordon, Georgia. That is the centralized location for every signal MOS or area of concentration that is going to be that will be taught for the Signal Regiment. So anybody who's a 25 series MOS will go to Fort Gordon to receive training. That Center of Excellence is responsible for defining the requirements for each MOS. They're also required to allocate the training and define the training required to sort of train the skills necessary for each MOS. And then they also allocate broadening opportunities, which is something very unique and something that I had the opportunity to partake in within the Army. So the education of the workforce really boils down to two types of technical training and then two types of sort of strategic leadership training. And this is where I taught at. So I taught at the initial military training and advanced training level. And in the IMT arena, this is sort of where we're teaching those basic technical skills. And really it's basic for the job that is needing to be performed for that particular MOS. And that is different based off of MOS. So a network technician might have a different set of basic technical skills than perhaps a server administrator or a cloud administrator. Okay, we give them very broad scenarios because the Army is huge. We have a lot of different places that we can go, and there's no real way for us to sort of give them every little situation that they're going to see in their career. But what we can give them is we can give them very broad scenarios that we tend to see from each unit, from unit to unit. Another thing that we tend to do is we tend to focus on certifications. We want them to have something tangible walking out of the school so that they can walk into an organization and be immediately value added. Okay, so the advanced training, really, it's advanced training is slightly more advanced. Now we're talking about more advanced topics that perhaps we just had to give them a little bit of time in the field so that they can figure out how to perform and be really good at those basic functions. At the advanced level, now we're getting more into theory and how things work. And we're giving them more complex scenarios because at this point, they're probably integrating with more of a joint environment. So we're talking coalition partners, where it could be another country, or maybe it's even the Air Force or the Navy or the Marines. I'm not going to focus on the intermediate and senior training. This is for really like broad Army and broad strategic and joint scenarios where we need the more senior folks starting to learn about how the Army works. And that's really what that training is all about. Okay. So when it comes to the career and the career timeline, focusing once again on warrant officers, they have a very diverse background. And this is where the experience comes in. And this is one of the great things that I love about teaching warrant officers is because we have such a diverse experience in the Army, what happens is we tend to see our warrant officers getting produced around their third assignment or between their 6th and 9th year in service. And what that means for us is that they've already gone to 2 previous assignments on average. And by the time that they get to us, they already have a lot of experience. So now what we're doing is we're sort of getting everybody baseline to a certain level, and we're sending them out to the field on their 3rd assignment so that they can start having more responsibility based on their experience on their 1st and 2nd assignments. It's really interesting because once again, the education here, the education level is so diverse. Some people come in with bachelor's degrees, some come in with masters, some even have PhDs, and then some have no degrees at all. And once again, it makes for an interesting situation when we're looking to standardize training. So you can see here that the education level for number 2, which is going to be our advanced education, will happen somewhere between the 4th and 5th assignment, or somewhere between their CW2 and CW3, or Chief Warrant Officer 2 and Chief Warrant Officer 3 ranks. Okay, so this was sort of my target when I was actively teaching. I recently left the signal school to move on to my tactical assignment. So here we are, and this is sort of where the experience is accrued as a soldier, and this really applies to everybody. So first off, that first assignment, we're typically going to send them to a tactical unit, and that's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 years, depending on the individual. Somewhere between that tactical assignment, maybe they're going to go on a back-to-back tactical assignment, but somewhere in there, there's going to be some training, whether that's enlisted training or whether that's going to officer training. But ideally, after the tactical unit, we would send them over to a strategic unit. And these strategic units are more focused on strategic objectives rather than being sort of in a combat type situation. They're more or less supporting the tactical units. After we send them to strategic units, we send them to broadening units, which is really like it has nothing to do with your job, but more or less it would have to do with maybe as an instructor. You would be teaching other people, or maybe you're managing the entire workforce, the entire signal workforce, or maybe you're going to another location and you're learning a different skill, whether it's learning a terminal or earning a terminal degree, or maybe you're going to another institution or a company for that matter. For me, my broadening assignment was at Microsoft. So I had an opportunity to work at Microsoft for a year as a industry fellow. And so that allowed me to get some new skills and some other skills that we just didn't have in the Army. And so now it's really starting to pay dividends. And then of course it's a cycle. So we're going right back in. And so now we go back into the tactical units. Okay. And so we're accruing all of this experience. And one of the things that we want to do is, as we're going to these different units, as a warrant officer, I am evaluating our enlisted MOSs and our enlisted skills to try and produce more warrant officers. So it's sort of a mission for us as a warrant officer to find and train our replacements. And we're doing that by assessing each individual MOS. And then we write, basically, once we evaluate them, we recommend them to go to warrant officer school. And then, well, that's where I was at, teaching brand new warrant officers how to actually be a technician in the US Army. And so as an instructor, you have, or at least us, we have a very, well, let's put it this way. We're very unique and very limited in how many instructors that we can possibly have within the Army. Because what we're looking for is we're looking for people that have a lot of different experiences. And so for that, we're looking for people with broadening time. We're also looking for instructors that have civilian education, which once again, that diverse pool, I think it's becoming more popular now for warrant officers to have degrees, but there's still some that are out there that do not. We're looking for people that have stellar ratings across the board. We don't want to send people to our Center of Excellence and have them start training soldiers that, well, are just sort of run-of-the-mill folks. We want the highest caliber person possible over here, making a great impression on the young warrant officers. And then we're also looking for innovators. We're looking for people that have affected the Army in a big and grand way. And we want to pull them back in, and we want them to share that experience with the new warrant officers so that we can help motivate them to influence change in their areas as well. The instructor roles are pretty diverse. And so as an instructor, we're responsible for coaching the students on day-to-day business. We're coaching them how to become a subject matter expert and really be able to answer those difficult questions that they're going to be asked. We are certified trainers, or at least we try to be, and we try to facilitate the experiential learning model, which the US Army tends to really cherish. That is the way that the Army trains and teaches their classes, is we leverage the students within the class for them to share their experience with each other, so that the students are really telling the story on the lesson, and the instructor is really more or less just facilitating the discussion. Okay. So some of the challenges that we face within the US Army, is that, for one, each instructor, as you may have seen in sort of that circle chart, each instructor is unique and they carry all their different experiences with them. It's not like we all start off on the same note. We all go to different units and we have different experiences. So by the time we become warrant officers, now we're so unique in the Army that I would say that no one person has the same experiences. Another issue that we have, or a challenge really, is that the broadening assignments are limited. So we can't always send our entire workforce out to these broadening assignments to go earn degrees and go to another industry like a company to get that external experience. So broadening assignments are limited, therefore our instructor pool is limited. Then college education, since it's not mandatory, is once again one of those things that that kind of hurts us as well. In a sense that we would much rather prefer, pulling folks in that do have degrees, just because there are certain expectations with a degree, such as reading and writing and being comfortable talking in front of people, that sort of thing. And then the certifications. Certifications are a huge one because since everybody has a different experience, the certifications that are needed when they show up to the school to teach, they may not have the proper credentials to teach the topic that we need them to teach. And so this is sort of one of those things that we started figuring out as we were starting to develop new curriculum. And that is when we were looking at the curriculum, when I first showed up, there were very outdated lesson plans. And this was just 3 years ago. A lot of our lesson plans were dated back for Server 2012. I think maybe we had a couple of Server 2008 R2 lesson plans in there as well. And so one of the challenges here was that, well, who was going to teach this curriculum? We couldn't even get the curriculum to, like, the labs to run. But a lot of the Army specific applications that we have, they're monoliths. They're old and legacy, and they run very well, but they run on old platforms. And it's really hard to teach our latest and greatest curriculum when we have old Army applications, and then also want the students to go and get a certification afterwards. Well, I think everybody understands that IT changes rapidly here, and we're getting new updates and new versions of the operating system. And now with the cloud, we literally have new updates rolling out every week, and there are new features, and the curriculum that we have just could not keep the pace with the technology. So one of the things that we did as part of the modernization for our curriculum is we've generalized our learning objectives. And instead of saying, we need training on server 2019 or server 2022 or server 2016, what we did here was we said we just need training on Windows Server. And that allows us to pull all the latest up-to-date curriculum that we need from Microsoft Learn or from the just from our Imagine Academy. And then one of the things that we also did was, we found Extreme Labs, and we reached out, and we really needed some help with hosting some of these labs, some labs that we were unable to host ourselves, not due to technical inability to do it, but really it's convenience, time. A lot of this stuff that we needed, Extreme Labs already had. And one thing that industry taught me is that everything that we tend to do as an IT professional in the US Army directly translates on the outside. So, for example, when I walked into Microsoft, I immediately was value added to the team because all the skills that I've gained over the many years in the Army were directly transferable over to Microsoft, which was an extremely humbling experience. So by allowing or by finding a lab hosting provider such as Extreme Labs, we were able to deliver the latest and greatest curriculum to our students, and that had some surprising side effects, actually. One thing that we didn't expect it, but we kind of knew it was coming, which is the certifications versus instructor qualifications comparison. And if we take a look at the sort of the blue line that you see here for uncertified instructor, this was when we stood up our cloud training program. We didn't really have anybody certified in the cloud, and nor were we really pressing the certification, students getting certified. So what we saw was that there was an underwhelming number of students that were getting certified based off the instructor that was also teaching the topic. We discovered that if the instructor is not certified, then the students aren't going to press the certification and they're not going to push themselves. But as we later found out, when we switched over to Extreme Labs and as our instructors were earning their credentials, we noticed that a certified instructor teaching the topic really motivated the students to go and get the certification. And then when we made the full switch to Extreme Labs, we noticed that when this instructor was certified and the students were using the labs in Extreme Labs and they were to go through and repeat these labs over and over, then their confidence level grew. And when they took the first certification and passed it with flying colors, it sort of had a compounding effect where they moved from one certification and immediately into the next one so that they can walk out of there with another certification. And this held true for all the curriculum that we started teaching. This is just a sample from what we found out from our cloud fundamentals and cloud administration. But I think the way ahead here, for us at least, is to continue to encourage students to earn certifications. We plan to still, the Army's still going to leverage those broadening opportunities and bring those highly qualified instructors into the workforce. And I think we're going to continue the partnership with Extreme Labs, or at least lab hosting providers in general, so that we can always get latest and up-to-date courseware. Those are some of our major lessons that we've learned, and I really hope that this was at least informative so that you all can hear from the Army's perspective on how we're training our workforce and how we're leveraging experience by performing some of these jobs and roles over many years, and then bringing that experience back in to teach our students